Okay, today we are on part 2 of the nervous system, and some of the main things that we'll be talking about are cranial versus spinal nerves, and afferent versus efferent pathways. That's not actually how you really pronounce them. I think it's afferent and efferent, but I will say afferent and efferent just because it's easier to differentiate between the two words. The other two sound too similar. And we'll be looking at the sympathetic versus parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system. So our question of the day with this creepy looking human here is, why are certain areas of your body more sensitive than others? And this will make sense by the end. So for the pre-lecture assignment, it's pretty straightforward here. Just to review from last time, you have I think we talked about this, yes. The central nervous system, the CNS, which are made up of the brain and the spinal cord. And then you have the peripheral nervous system, which is everything on the outside of that. So here's a little portion of the spine here. And remember, we have gray matter and white matter. And the white matter is the nerves that are wrapped in myelin, so they conduct action potentials faster. A little more anatomy here. You'll need to know the words dorsal and ventral. I'll write this right here. Is this on here? No. Okay, so dorsal and ventral. So again, these are anatomy terms, and the way that I was taught is dorsal is referring to the back part of your body. And again, the way I was taught that is like, don't let the door hit you on the back as you walk out. So dorsal is the back side, and ventral is the front side of your body. If you're laying in anatomical position, which is on your back with your palms facing up. So another way to remember is sharks have a dorsal fin, and it's found on their back. So that might help you remember as well. But there is a dorsal root going into the spinal cord and also a ventral root that comes out. And we'll talk about those in just a minute. These would be good flashcard items to make flashcards with if that's a good way for you to learn. And also Quizlet. I don't know if you guys use Quizlet. I know my 7th graders use it quite a bit, but you could type in like brain function Quizlet and see if some of these are on there. So let's get into it. So with the brain, we are first going to start with the primary control areas. So these are found on both hemispheres, meaning halves of the brain. And what's interesting is they control opposite sides of the body. So the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. The left side of your brain controls the right side of the body. That should just say opposite. Control opposite side of the body. So, let's see if I have a picture of this here somewhere. I don't know that I do. Okay, so we'll just look at this little brain image here. So the cortex is, like the cerebral cortex, am I thinking of the right word, is all of this like folded tissue that you think of at the top. This is the cerebellum. Oh, cerebrum, or cerebral cortex, yeah. And then this here is the brainstem. So the primary control areas are found on both hemispheres. These halves of the brain, we're only looking at half right now from the side. And there are regions of the cerebral cortex that control specific functions. Okay, so there's actually this strip on your brain here that controls different areas, motor areas, so meaning like movement of these different areas of your brain. Sorry, I don't know if that's just because it's small or not focused or what. And then right behind that is the somatosensory area that senses different parts of your body. So let's talk about the primary motor area, which is this blue portion that you're looking at here. And it's also called the primary motor cortex. And what this area does is sends voluntary commands to skeletal muscles. That's where they start. That's where the message starts. Then the primary somatosensory area that you're looking at here on the brain gets sensory info from the skin and skeletal muscles. That's where it arrives and it is processed there. So the question of the day, I guess we'll answer it already, is why are certain areas of your body more sensitive than others? So we want to be looking at the somatosensory area because that's where you sense things. And if you look and think about parts of your body, what's going to be more sensitive, for example, like your fingertips, your thumb, and your hand, or your, your arm, for example. We use our fingers for a lot of sensation for feeling and touching. So they're more sensitive, and you can see there's actually more space on your brain dedicated to sensing things from that area than there are from your arm. And so this used to be called the sensory motor somatosensory homunculus or something like that. But you can see the different parts of the body, and hopefully you can see this better on your picture than you can on mine. I'm still trying to figure out why it's not looking focused. But anyway, the more area of the brain that's dedicated to that body part is going to make it more sensitive. So to write down the answer to that, the size of the area equals the amount of cortex devoted to that region so more sensitive parts of your body equal more of the cortex. Devoted to that area. And this you can do, I would recommend it. This we do in physiology labs. You get with a partner and get two pencils. Mechanical pencils work best. and complete the following. So you guys are probably watching this at home. Maybe have a family member help you out, or you can even try it on your own. It might be kind of difficult, but groups of two take out two pencils and have one person be the subject and the other will hold the pencils, and have the subject close their eyes, and on the palm of one of the subject's hands put both pencil points together. So whoever is the other person, the subject's going to hold out their hand and the other person's going to put the two pencil points together and gently poke their hand. And then you'll ask the subject if they can feel two pencil points or one. Then you move them slightly apart, just a tiny bit, do the same thing and ask the same question. And then once that person, the subject, can identify that there are actually two pencils poking them, you would make note of that distance. So it's this many inches or this many centimeters or what. Sorry, inches are a swear word in science. However many centimeters it is, approximately. And then you would repeat the process in the middle of the back or your neck or your arm. And then of those areas, which had the best 2-point discrimination? So which one could tell sooner that there were two pencils poking them rather than one? And then decide how does that relate to the diagrams above. Look at the area devoted to whatever two areas you tested and see if it kind of matches. And remember, the more area devoted to that body part, the more sensitive it should be. So just over the years that I've done this in physiology lab, I want to say that the palm of the hand is one of the most sensitive places, and one of the least sensitive places is like their mid-back. So try that out. Don't do it on your genitals, though. That might get weird. Anyway, moving along. The peripheral nervous system. So remember that this is everything that's not the central nervous system. It's out to the periphery, to the sides. So you've got your brain and spinal cord central, and then peripheral is everything else. And this contains the nerves of the body. And what a nerve is a bundle of axons surrounded by connective tissue. Sorry, I have to keep waking up my computer. So remember, the axon is that long part of the nerve that is conducting the action potential, the nerve impulse. And so what you have here is a single nerve fiber. You can see that this one in particular is wrapped in that myelin. And then you've got a whole bunch of those nerve fibers bundled together. And then you have bundles of those bundles bundled together. And that's what makes up your nerves. So nerves carry information to and from the central nervous system. So you have cranial nerves and you have spinal nerves. And so in this image here, we see the cranial nerves. And in anatomy, you got to remember all of them and where they are and what they do. For now, just note, and this is very frequently missed on the exam, so I've heard, is that the cranial nerves are still fall under the division of the peripheral nervous system. And so you might think, oh, well, it's the brain, so it's the central nervous system, but it's still not technically a part of the brain. They carry information to and from the brain. So don't get that wrong. Keep in mind that the cranial nerves are part of the peripheral nervous system, not the central, as you might assume. So you have 12 pairs of cranial nerves that emerge from the brain. And they relay information to and from the head, neck, and face. And if you ever take anatomy and get to look at the brain, the cranial nerves are so cool. So, for example, some of the things that they control are like the mouth and jaw muscles, eye muscles, taste buds, facial muscles, glands, tongue muscles. Let's see, did I already say olfactory receptors? So like your smell, the retina of your eyes, information from your inner ear for balance, things like that. And then with your spinal nerves, you have 31 pairs. And we're saying pairs because your body is bilaterally symmetrical. So you're going to have 12 coming out one side, 12 coming out the other. And then for the spinal nerves, 31 that branch out each side. And they emerge from each side of the spinal cord. And they are going to relay information to and from the rest of your body. Okay, so here we have like a cross section of the spine and spinal cord, and like looking down at it from the top is what you're looking at here. So we'll talk a little bit more about those parts in just a second. But the peripheral nervous system has two pathways. So we looked at a picture similar to this last time, but you've got the central nervous system, which is made of the brain and spinal cord, and this is where you find interneurons. Those are the type of nerves that you have there. And then you have the sensory information that comes in from the peripheral nervous system. They carry that information into the brain and the spinal cord. And then you have the motor nerves. So these are sensory neurons here. And then you've got the motor neurons that carry information from the CNS to effectors. So things like muscles and glands. And something that was just added to this, and I'm going to write it bigger because I know this is so small, is afferent and efferent. And this is something you definitely need to know. We're going to talk about it right now. So we'll talk about the afferent pathway here and the efferent pathway here. So the afferent pathway are your sensory nerves. And these relay sensory signals from the body to the central nervous system. And they enter the spinal cord via the dorsal root and the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. So a way that I've been taught to remember what goes with what, because you're going to need to know afferent is sensory nerves and that it enters through the dorsal part of the spinal cord. So if you remember SAD, because it's so sad, you have to remember all this. Their sensory neurons make up the afferent pathway, and they enter through the dorsal root and horn of the spinal cord. So this isn't the best diagram here, but remember this would be like, this is the ventral side, so this is like the front of your body, and this is the back. This is where you would find the bumpy parts that make up the spine of your back. The ventral root and horn is going to be, where am I here? This area right here. So on the dorsal side, the back side. For the efferent pathway, these are your motor nerves. And they are going to relay the response from the central nervous system to effectors which are your target glands and organs of the body. So if it helps, you can remember E is for exit, because this efferent pathway is going to exit the spinal cord or the central nervous system and go to the other parts of your body. And these exit the spinal cord via the ventral root and ventral horn. So efferent pathway, this may not be helpful because it doesn't really mean anything, but if you can just remember MEV, these are your motor nerves for efferent, and they come from the ventral root and horn. So that's the front part of the body. So I'm just going to kind of circle that here. And we'll put an A for afferent and an E for efferent here. And cranial nerves are interesting because they can be sensory, motor, or a mix of both. So if you're able to see what this says on your paper, it's saying like to and from, which means you've got sensory information coming in as well as like motor information coming out. I don't think you have to know that, but just the brain, the cranial nerves have both pathways. All right, we're still on the peripheral nervous system and looking this time at the motor efferent pathway divisions. So these are somatic motor nerves, and they relay information from the central nervous system to your skeletal muscles. So the muscles that are controlling like your motor movements. And the responses for this are conscious, and voluntary. So whether you think you do or not, you decide, as I'm writing, I'm deciding how I'm going to move my fingers, the muscles in my fingers and hands to write certain letters. Or I'm deciding that I'm going to uncross my legs right now because one of my legs is falling asleep, or whatever it is. Those are voluntary and conscious. And the exception to this are reflexes, and these are involuntary. So reflexes, you touch a hot stove, and I don't even think the message goes to your brain. It goes to your spinal cord, and you immediately move your hand away. Or if you've had your reflexes tested in your, I forget what the nerve is called, but in your knee, where they tap your knee and your foot will just involuntarily kick, those are the exceptions. Then you've got the autonomic motor nerves, and autonomic to me sounds like automatic, so this is something that is involuntary. It's just automatic. And the autonomic motor nerves relay info from the central nervous system to your smooth muscles, your cardiac muscles, and your glands. And the responses are subconscious, and involuntary. Which is a great thing, because how inconvenient would it be if you had to be like heartbeat, heartbeat, heartbeat 60 to 80 times a minute, or to tell your small intestine to squeeze your cheeseburger through that you just ate. So, yeah, these are autonomic, automatic, subconscious, involuntary. Smooth muscles in your digestive system, cardiac muscles, glands, etc. Okay, sympathetic nerves. So if you look here, again, we're looking at the same kind of picture. We've got the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord. We've got the interneurons in here that integrate the information coming in. You've got the sensory afferent information coming in through those sensory nerves and entering through the dorsal part of the spinal cord. And we can kind of divide this into two sections. So you've got somatic sensory nerves. These are signals from your skin, muscles, joints, special senses. And the visceral sensory nerves, these are signals from your body organs. Over here, and you go way into this in physiology, so you've got your exit signal coming out, the motor efferent nerves going through the ventral horn, exiting from the ventral horn of the spinal cord, and they carry motor information from the CNS to the effectors. So these can be your motor nerves, so your voluntary skeletal muscles that we just talked about here. It can be your autonomic motor nerves, so your smooth muscles, heart, glands, etc. And then we can split that autonomic division even further, and you've got your sympathetic division and your parasympathetic division. So I would know this. I don't know if zooming in will even help with this new camera. Not too much. Anyway, the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, think of as fight or flight. And the parasympathetic is rest and digest. Those are the ways that we're typically taught to remember that. So sympathetic nerves, so we're looking at this area of the chart right here, are active during times of emergency, excitement, Okay, so I think of it as, oh, your nerves are being sympathetic because you're nervous, you're in an emergency, you're being chased by a bad guy, you're excited to go on this roller coaster ride, you're about to exercise. Anything that's going to get your heart rate up is your sympathetic nerves, are your sympathetic nerves. And these emerge from your thoracic and lumbar regions of the spinal cord. So like mid to lower back. And the neurotransmitter that it releases is norepinephrine. Onto effectors. So sympathetic, think fight or flight. And then parasympathetic is when you're just chilling, rest and digest. So parasympathetic nerves are active during rest and digestion. And these emerge from the brainstem and sacral regions of the spinal cord. So kind of from the very top and the very bottom. And the neurotransmitter that it releases onto the effectors is acetylcholine. That says effectors. So I just wrote a lot. I'm going to leave this here for a second. So these are very good charts to look at. Anytime in your notes that something is circled or squared or whatever in red, that's probably something you should know. And it even notes here, know the effect of the sympathetic nervous system. It's usually abbreviated that way. And parasympathetic nervous system on these effectors. So the structures, the heart, the lungs, and the gastrointestinal tract. So your sympathetic nervous system, remember this is like fight or flight. Imagine you're being chased by a bad guy. You're going to want your heart rate to increase. Your lungs, you want bronchial muscle relaxation, which is going to help you increase your breathing rate. And for your GI tract, your digestion, you're going to want decreased motility. Because if you're being chased by a bad guy, digesting your cheeseburger goes way down on the priority list, and your energy and all your efforts are going to want to be focused on moving fast, which is going to require more blood pumped and more oxygen going to your cells. So it's going to increase your heart rate and your breathing rate, and it's going to slow down your digestion. On the other hand, parasympathetic, when you're resting, your heart rate slows down. Your bronchial muscles contract because you don't need to be getting as much air in and out. And you have increased motility of your GI tract. So your digestion is going. Because you're resting, you need to get that food digested, and that's the good time. So you can read through these others as well, but make sure you know those that are circled right there. Autonomic motor efferent pathways for sympathetic and parasympathetic. Just remember that sympathetic is involuntary. They emerge from the thoracic and lumbar parts of your spinal cord. The neurotransmitters norepinephrine, and the effectors are smooth and cardiac muscle and glands. Parasympathetic is also involuntary. We're still looking at the autonomic division here. They emerge from the brainstem and sacral part of the spinal cord. Neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, and the effectors are the same thing, smooth and cardiac muscles and glands. So this is a good chart to know as well. Basically, it's just summing all of this up in one nice little chart. So we don't have anything to write here, but this is just a good chart to look at. You can try this at home if you want, but if you measure your resting heart rate, like for example, I've got a Fitbit that measures mine, and it's typically around high 70 beats per minute. But you can measure your resting heart rate, and then if you get a bowl of ice water and submerge your hand in the ice water and watch your heart rate, it's going to, well, just imagine what it would do. It's going to increase because you've activated the sympathetic division of your autonomic nervous system. And because that's, I mean, I don't know about you, but to me, that is painful. I want to get my hand out of there. And that's going to activate the sympathetic nervous system. So anyways, over here in this picture, we've got sympathetic on this side. We've got parasympathetic on this side, and then it shows the regions where the nerves emerge from the spinal cord. So you've got the thoracic and lumbar nerves, and then it shows the different parts of the body that they go to. And over here, it emerges from the brainstem and the sacral nerves. And then it kind of shows what it does to each of the organs. So the sympathetic is going to speed the heart rate. The parasympathetic is going to slow it. Sympathetic is going to dilate the air passages so you can get more air in. The parasympathetic will constrict it. The parasympathetic is going to increase all this digestive activity, whereas the sympathetic is going to decrease it. So anyway, a good little chart to look at here. And then it's also noted here that acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter, and primarily with parasympathetic, and then norepinephrine is the neurotransmitter with sympathetic. So I think that's it. That one wasn't too long today. So I say this every time and no one ever asks me questions, but feel free to message me on Canvas if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.